everyone. Welcome to Menopause Chats. I'm Erin. I always say I'm delighted and excited, and it's true. But today I have my healthcare provider here, and I'm so honored that you said yes to joining us. We have Christina Saldanha, who is, as I mentioned, my healthcare provider, the first healthcare provider I went to where I felt like I was heard. So it was a really good experience. I talk about it in a different video, so I won't belabor it here. But thank you for saying
Thank
like
you.
a non-hesitant yes when I asked you in my last appointment if you would do this. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So tell us a little bit about your background, like how I know you didn't start in doing primary care for like or specializing in menopause. So how did you end up in this space and helping women?
Yeah, so I have a non-traditional path to medicine. I've been interested in medicine since I was a child. I tell people that I was first interested in women's health when my mom sat me down to have the period talk. She showed me this book. It was a book that I still have it. It's called A Child is Born, and it's from it was like printed in the 70s. And so it had just like really raw pictures of pregnant women and women giving birth and that sort of thing. And I wasn't so much interested in the birth part, but I was really interested in like just the women's body part. Like I just thought that was so cool how women's bodies change across her life. And so when I was little, I literally used to tell people I wanted to be a gynecologist, um, which my parents were like, okay. So I always knew I wanted to go into medicine, but I went into undergrad and then I went to grad school at NC State and I got a master's of physiology because I thought I wanted to go to medical school. And that was kind of always the plan for me. But then when I was in grad school, I was having a lot of anxiety and just like the stress of grad school, and I was like in a very intensive program at NC State, and it was a lot. I was also TAing a genetics lab, and I was like, I don't know, this is kind of like too much. And I was also about to get married at that time, and I was like, I don't want to set my life up and be stressed out all the time. And so I actually found hot yoga and I started practicing hot yoga, and this was in Raleigh, and I loved doing yoga at the time I was learning physiology because it was like the duality between like the science of what was happening, but then also like this ancient healing practice. And I was able to get off of anxiety medicine because of yoga. And that really wasn't the intention, but it just spoke to how much better I was feeling. And so after I graduated from NC State, I graduated in May, I got married in June, and I was like, I just want to become a yoga teacher. Like this is so therapeutic and this is my form of medicine. And so later that year I went to LA for the rest of the year and got certified in Bikram yoga, hot yoga. And that was in 2012. And so when I came back home from that, I started teaching and I taught for 5 years. I taught full-time yoga for 5 years. I was very like ingrained in the yoga community and just like other healing modalities because that's just kind of what comes along with it. And at the time, yoga was like hot yoga, especially, was kind of really in its not really in its infancy, but it was just starting to gain popularity and whatnot. And so I taught, and then I was kind of like, well, I love teaching yoga, but like I really like the science and the medical part of it, and I really want to work one-on-one with people. So I was actually doing a lot of acupuncture at the time, and I remember having a conversation with my acupuncturist, like, should I go to acupuncture school? I really like acupuncture. I really like herbs. I also felt like I was getting a lot of benefit from that. Like I was having a lot of abdominal pain. It was diagnosed as IBS, but it was really anxiety popping
Isn't
back up.
IBS like also just sort of a catch-all for like you
Absolutely.
have digestive issues?
Yes, absolutely. And so like they wanted to take my gallbladder out because I was just having like this vague abdominal pain and anyways, like through visceral work and acupuncture, like I just started feeling better, but really like the anxiety piece was getting treated and I just was like this is so therapeutic. I don't like that medical part of it. Like I still don't fit quite in that model because I'm like, I myself do all these other things for that. So I remember talking to her and I was like, I don't know if I should go back into medicine, like allopathic medicine or pursue acupuncture. And I talked to her a lot about it and talked to some other people. And basically, what she told me that made me veer away from acupuncture and go into like traditional medicine is she was like, you'll probably help more people if you go into traditional medicine. So that's how I ended up at PA school. Didn't want to go back. I'm older at this point and didn't want to go back through all of the time commitment, for medical school. So that's how I chose PA. So while I was in PA school, I still have this interest in women's health, but I've also got like these years of experience as a yoga teacher and also just personal experience in like alternative therapies. And I'm like, okay, how am I going to shape this to fit who I am as a person and how I want to treat people like in that space. So, you do all the things in medical training for PA school and all the check all those boxes. And I wanted to go into women's health, but I didn't want to do the baby thing. I didn't want to do the OB thing because that was never really what I was interested in. I really like conversing with people. I really like following people through their life. And so I found myself in GYN oncology because there's no babies there. And so I went into that and my hope was is that I would be able to work more with like survivors and like focusing on people's life after their cancer diagnosis and really helping them feel well, both from mostly at that time in the beginning from a sexual perspective. Like, cancer survivors have a lot of sexual problems, either from the cancer treatment or just like the psychology around it. And so but then what I found was that the cancer survivors were like, actually, I have horrendous hot flashes. I'm now menopausal. Some women would experience what we call a second menopause, like if their ovaries come out after menopause. It's not really a second menopause, but that's just what people would call it. And I was like, I don't know what to do about this. Because just like everybody else in traditional medical training, you're not taught about menopause. I actually had a 45-minute lecture, but I was the one who gave it in PA school, like because we did a situation called problem-based learning where we kind of like would learn through cases and then kind of figure it out on our own because that's what you have to do in medicine is you have to like keep learning, so developing that skill. So when I was like, oh, I need to learn about menopause, and that's actually how I found the Menopause Society and did some training with them and got certified in 2020. And then 2020, everybody knows what happened in 2020 was the pandemic. So it was just a different landscape in medicine. And I was like, I also had two young children at this time, and I was doing a lot of stuff in GYN oncology. I was assisting in the operating room. I was rounding on patients. I was admitting people to the hospital. I was doing chemo visits. I was kind of all over the place, and I was like, this is not feeling like a balance for me. So then I went into family medicine, and they were really supportive of like my interests in menopause and sexual health. And so that I was like, well, this makes sense. This is continuity of care. I can take care of people in their totality and through life and whatever comes up with them. And, as you and I both know, menopause really affects every part of your life. So I was like, this is great. And it was good, but primary care in a hospital-based system is challenging for all involved,
Right.
workers,
Act like
patients.
it's a short window of time. Like in order, like you only get a certain amount. It's not that you don't, as a practitioner, at least my understanding, it's not that you don't want to spend time with your patients. It's just you can't.
You
Just
can't.
the model is.
Exactly. You can't. And so I was feeling very burnt out. And in at the end of 2021, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. It was time for me to renew my medical license and my board certification. And I almost did not. I was like, I'm going back to teaching yoga. I was actually looking at going back to acupuncture school at the time. Um, and my husband and actually my sister were like, why don't you just do your own thing? And I'm like, I can't do that. That's too much. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a, you know, it was going to be a lot of work. It still is a lot of work, but I didn't even know where to start. But anyways, something in me, I guess, was like, okay, let's just try this. So then I opened it. My practice opened up first initially as a telehealth only for menopause care, and then 3 months later, I opened up in person because people were asking me to. People were having problems with their blood pressure, with their cholesterol. They needed a PAP. They, hadn't seen a primary care provider in so long. And I'm like, menopause care is primary care. So, like, I'm just going to blend the two and I'm going to practice medicine the way that I want to
Mhm.
practice it. So, 3 years later, here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you're here.
Me too.
Because my experience has been really positive. I think, again, I had mentioned it in one of my other videos. Like, I think our first appointment was like 90 minutes, and it's just like getting that opportunity to be heard. And then, I chose then to make you my primary care because I was like, all right, like this is like somebody's listening to me. I feel like it's a partnership, right?
Yeah.
I talked about this on another video where it's like, my cholesterol is like borderline high, but like, should I be on a statin? Should I not be on a statin? And, sort of just this back and forth and being involved in the decision to, to go on a med or not go on a med, and feeling like I'm making an informed choice, with you, in conjunction with
Yeah.
you. Whereas I don't feel like I've had that in the past where it's more of like, do as I say and like that's it. Or like I ask questions and it's like I'm coming across as the annoying patient, and maybe I am. But just that I have a lot of curiosity, as you know. And so it's like, oh, I'm reading about this. And I'm like, and then as too, like when I got down when we first met and I found out I was actually postmenopausal, surprise, I went down this whole rabbit hole of like learning about menopause and all, just different things that I think I messaged you at one point and was like, what about people who are transgender? Because there was this whole thing of,
Yes.
like if you still have the biology of a woman, like you will still go through menopause. And then I got really
Right.
curious in that. And I think my question to you was like, I'm assuming there's not a lot of research here because there's hardly any research on women who still identify as who were born biologically female and still identify as female. So it was, I got curious about that, and you're like, yeah, there really isn't a lot, in this area
Yeah.
either. So, and that, again, I just get curious about stuff and then
I
start.
love it. I love a curious patient. I love patients that ask questions that are curious. And you're right, it is a partnership. I went to a talk by Dr. Andrew Weil, who is like a pioneer in integrative medicine space. And I was 5 weeks, not 5 months. I was 5 weeks postpartum, and it was the first time I left my child. But he was going to Charlotte, and I really wanted to hear him talk. And one of the things that I'll never forget he said is that part of the part of the medicine and part of like the therapeutic process is the relationship between the provider and the patient. And like because there's so much that happens there between conversation, trust, rapport, back and forth, making a shared decision. Like that is therapeutic in and of itself. Um, and I'll just never forget when he said that because I was like, that resonates with me so much.
Yeah, I was just listening. We were talking about, I listened to a book. It's called Why Woo Woo Works. And they were talking about that specifically how there's been studies of people who have more empathetic doctors versus people who don't, like, so a controlled study where like somebody's like has a more empathetic response versus, and how that can help in someone's healing or someone's healthcare journey, by having a more empathetic doctor who has like a better bedside manner or kind of help with that. So yeah, I was kind of, because I think what I was sharing with you is like I didn't know there was this whole thing called lifestyle medicine.
Mhm.
And then you're like, yeah, it's kind of what I do, but like, so, I guess because I just literally learned about this yesterday, and it all makes sense to me. So, do you want to share a little bit about like what does lifestyle medicine mean?
Yeah, so we were talking about this before. It's I probably don't say it as concisely as someone who like labels themselves as a lifestyle medicine provider, but it's just really working on lifestyle, sleep, nutrition, body movement, stress reduction. Um, we talked about social connection. I actually posted something on my Instagram the other day about how menopausal symptoms are reduced with cold exposure when done as a community. And we don't have to go into deliberate cold exposure, but I like highlight on the community piece because a lot of women feel isolated in midlife in this time period, whether it's because they've got aging parents, they're still taking care of their kids. Maybe they're like coming to terms with choosing not to have kids. And what does that look like as they age? Or they're changing their career or they're like at the top of their career and figuring out where do we go from here. So I think there's a lot of isolation. So I think connection is a big piece in that lifestyle medicine realm. And integrative medicine and functional medicine, those are different. All three of those are different, but they kind of fall under the same umbrella. People are more familiar with the term integrative medicine. But it's, really focusing on quite literally your lifestyle. Like, what is your stress reduction or reduction techniques? What brings you pleasure and joy? And Aaron, you were talking about how your coach had you make an energizer and a draining list. Like, exactly, because that has so much impact on our health. And some people are sometimes looking for the medication or the supplement or the diet program or the correct exercise. And it's kind of like, well, maybe you need all of it, none of it. Maybe you just need to like be reflective. And that's one thing that between me and Whitney, the other PA that works with me, we spend a lot of time just kind of like bouncing back and forth. Like we really want patients who are self-reflective because this is your life, right? Like I'm just here to help guide you. But so yeah, lifestyle medicine is all about the nitty-gritty nuance of, specifically what does that one person really need to address in their life to keep them healthy and well and happy.
Yeah. What advice do you have for people if they're, people are going through like perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, whatever, that whole like sort of this back half. Like what kind of
I
things
love the
can they be
background.
doing? Like say that you're like, I don't want to do hormone therapy. I don't, I can't, maybe I can't afford to see somebody who's a specialist or there aren't any specialists in my area or my insurance doesn't cover it, whatever. What advice do you have for them around like how do you ride this wave of this time of our lives?
Yeah, so people have been riding this wave for this time of life for a long time. And I'm not to say that like, oh, we just all need to like ride the wave and be cool with it. I think that was prior generations. Now the pendulum has swift shifted while we're having this like menopause moment. And I think so then people sometimes feel like, oh, I got to do so much about this. And the truth is that maybe you do, but maybe you don't. And I think again, being really just self-reflective on what do you know? What do you feel like you need to know? And what can you do? What do you have control over that you can maybe shift and change around, right? And the thing is that menopause is not a diagnosis. Menopause is not a pathology. Menopause is not a disease state. There is nothing bad or problematic about menopause itself. It is a natural life transition. It's the puberty, but in reverse is what I call it. Puberty is like the onslaught of a bunch of hormones. You have this weird fluctuating time for about 18 to 36 months, as a young woman, and then perimenopause is literally the reverse. Chaotic hormones fluctuating, your hormones are diminishing, they're going away. We don't term puberty as like a pathology per se, but I think that the dysfunction happens in the knowledge gap within the woman herself, like not even understanding what's going on in her body, the knowledge gap in the healthcare providers for not providing like what we would call expectant management. Um, and so I think just first recognizing that it's it's very common to feel out of control. It's very common to feel bad, honestly. And some women are like, "Well, I don't feel bad." And I mean, I have more questions for them, of course, but if you don't feel bad, then that's fine. You don't have to feel bad. My own mom says she had no problems. She never had a hot flash. I still to this day, I'm like, "Are you sure you never had a hot flash?" It's not all about hot flashes, but so I guess like, the take home message is like it's not a dysfunction, but you do deserve a conversation with somebody who is knowledgeable and can provide facts and unbiased opinion about what is happening and what you could do about the symptoms that are most bothersome to you because of this transition. So, like, even though the transition is normal and not pathologic in nature, there is a lot of problems, honestly, that can come from it. And sometimes you can feel and you can acknowledge like mood, hot flashes, vaginal dryness, painful sex, recurrent UTIs, itchy skin. I mean, right, the list goes on. And some of them you can't see or you can't necessarily feel, like cholesterol going up, blood pressure going up, insulin resistance coming into the picture, your risk for type 2 diabetes, your risk for colon cancer actually goes up after um, menopause. So I think everybody deserves a good conversation. And I know your next question is going to be,
Yeah. How
where
do
do
they
they
have that if the
go?
doctor dismisses them? Because that's been the experience of so many people that I talk to of being dismissed. It was my own personal experience as well for my original primary. So how can people advocate for themselves?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And as you and I have talked about, I am currently a doctoral candidate at Wake Forest University, and my project is like understanding this gap because I feel like this gap cannot change unless we understand why it is here. So I'm specifically looking at like the biases and the perceptions of primary care providers specifically into why they are having a hard time integrating new guidelines. Like our new menopause guidelines came out in 2022. We adjust and adapt to new guidelines in medicine all the time. Things change. The blood pressure normal number has changed. The cholesterol normal number has changed, right? Like we adopt as we go throughout our careers as medical professionals to all types of changing guidelines. Why can't we change our thoughts and views around menopause care? So that's what I'm trying to understand. So in that process, I've been trying to see like what is out there for patients. Like, does this need to come from the patient end and the provider end? What happens if the patient doesn't get what they need from their provider? Then what? And so I think that the best place to start is with the Menopause Society. It's menopause.org. I'm sure you've linked it somewhere
Yeah, I
before,
I
but
have a little bit of how to find a
oh, that's right.
yeah, yeah.
I think they have a lot of great resources on there that are easily to digest information. They're called Meno Notes, and they give a very straightforward, unbiased approach to osteoporosis, vaginal dryness, recurrent UTIs, hot flashes, treatments for hot flashes, both hormonal, non-hormonal. And I think that if sometimes people don't even know what to ask because they don't have the language. Like we haven't taught women the language around a lot of things for their bodies, sexual health wise, hormone wise, period wise, menopause wise, all these things. And so I think if it just gives them at least a language and a knowledge base, then maybe they'll ask more targeted questions to their healthcare provider. Now, that's not going to necessarily change the behavior of the healthcare provider, but at least it'll help her feel a little bit more empowered. And at least if she can't have that conversation, she's at least has a resource that, again, is unbiased, factual, and is not trying to sell you something.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's my next question was like I've noticed, and we've talked about this as well. Like, menopause is having a moment, certainly, and there's people that I follow that I've been following for a little bit, and now I've noticed it's sort of shifted a little bit to maybe if it to me feels like they're selling stuff, right? So I guess I'm curious your thoughts on sort of these menopause influencers, so to speak, and what you've noticed.
Yeah. So there has been a shift. A lot, actually, I will say that when I started this practice in 2022, I was giving people uh, podcasts, social media handles to follow, um, because I was like, this is a great source of information, and you can look at it for 2 minutes. You can watch somebody's video or read somebody's post and get information from. Um, I don't do that anymore. I haven't actually done that in a while because a lot of times patients are coming to me and they're like, so and so said this, and I also saw this and this, and then they've seen somebody recommend something like creatine or a GLP-1 or a insert whatever from multiple different people, and they're like, should I do this? And so now actually tell people to stay off social media because yeah, it has this like selling tone, or it has this like, instead of just like educating around what something is, or the physiological process in the body, it's like this is, and even if they're not saying this is what you should do, we talked about this before. It's like the repeated seeing of the same things, and then you start to like wonder, well, do I need that? And should I buy that? And
Like everybody's doing this, and
yeah, yeah. And I welcome these questions, but a lot of times, like part of my visits are just going through a list of things they saw on Instagram. And I mean, I'm very candid and very honest. Like, I'll either say, I don't know anything about that. Peptides are another big one sometimes. And I'm like, I'll either tell people, I literally don't know anything about that. I will research it and send you a message. Or I'll say no, or I'll say yes, but actually, you don't need to buy that one. Why don't you get this less expensive one over here, or something like that. I have no problem with people wanting to make money. Like that's not an issue, but I do feel like I feel like there's kind of a fine line in the healthcare world with that. Like,
yeah, it just
a
feels silly
recommendation.
to me,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, that's your thing. And then I'm like, do most people realize this? Because we had talked earlier, it's like my background's actually in communication. So like I've always been more aware of the media and how things are sort of portrayed. It's like when something says, oh, we're the best thing, I'm the best. Who said you were the best? Like that sort of stuff. And so I'm always a little like skeptical, slightly skeptical about stuff. But this is the reason why I wanted to start the menopause chats was that it's like I wanted it to be real people who were talking about their real experiences and not
Yeah.
not edited and just like this is like there's nothing to sell here. It's just literally like I just want people to share their stories. But I'm
Yeah.
finding that like some people they're just people are not still not comfortable. So you're talking about the language, you think having people have the language to go to their healthcare provider. I still think that people are struggling with the language to even just talk to their girlfriends about it or talk to
Yeah.
their partners about it and just talk about it more generally. There people feel like it's like, oh, there's still, I think, a stigma around, around this process or people like, oh, I don't want people to know I'm going through this. Right. So,
Yeah. Yeah, the language is huge, which is why at the beginning of like my time in my private practice, I thought that was at least a beneficial piece of social media, was like they were just hearing this language from other people just like casually talking about it. But like I said, I don't actually, I'd never recommend anybody to follow. And I don't recommend as many podcasts either, because now everybody has a podcast, and it gets polished, and there's ads in those podcasts now.
yeah. And I know I was like, oh, I'm not here to sell anything, and neither are you, but I do want people to know like how they can find you if they are interested and they're in the area and that sort of thing. So area being
Yeah. So you can link my website. I will also say on my website is a blog, and I'm fairly active on the blog, and I write about lots of things. So like that's a way and I always link my resources and other websites and things like that. So I'm not selling anything on there. So that's how they could find me. They can also follow me on social media. I also don't sell anything on social media. And, my shift also has changed in social media. I used to post a lot of like educational stuff, but I kind of got burnt out from that, honestly. And I felt like people weren't really engaging with that kind of stuff anymore. So now it's more just kind of like real life or just stuff. So, but they could follow me there. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I so appreciate it. Please, if you're interested, click, like, share this with others. If you're interested in being on, please do tell me. I'm very interested in having more people's stories being heard. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.